Hi everyone. First of all, thank you for coming to my talk. I know I stand between you and the most important part of the day, the lunch, but I will ensure that this talk serves as an appetizer for the feast that awaits us. Okay, so a quick introduction for me. My name is Sanskar. In the mornings, I work as a software engineer at Bloomberg, and during the nights, I maintain free and open source software, and one of them is Robyn. Speaking of Robyn, we come to the question, what is Robyn? Simply put, Robyn is a fast async Python web framework with a Rust runtime. But before we dive any deeper, I'd like to tell you a story, the Robyn story. So once upon a time, in the vibrant month of April 2021, there was a university student who was overwhelmed, and his name was Sanskar. He was in the final year of his university, and he was supposed to submit a project. But like all diligent university students, he spent all his time scrolling Reddit. During that time, a major company decided to adopt Rust into their codebase, and Reddit was filled with memes about rewriting everything in Rust. And I, at that time, was an avid Flask user, and I was annoyed that Flask lacked async support back then. I had tried Quad and Fast API, but they didn't have much developer adoption back then. So scrolling Reddit, one fateful day, I got this epiphany. I asked myself, why not create Flask with async support? And then, you know what would make it cooler? If it was written in Rust, of course. And this is how Robyn was born. But let's come to the most important question of the talk. Why the name Robyn? Because I thought to myself that if I take care of an entity called Robyn, if I nurture it and develop it, that would automatically make me Batman. So if for some reason I am not responding to you, just have a bad signal beside you, and I have a moral obligation to come back to you. And since its inception, Robyn is hosted on GitHub, is housed under a BSD 2.0 clause, is currently at version 0.31.0, is more than 2,600 stars on GitHub, has more than 750,000 installs on PyPI, but most importantly, it's under active development. And over time, we have acquired some sponsors, and I'm really thankful for them. But most importantly, a project that was started as a single-person project has more than 40 contributors. Yeah, you may see some familiar faces here, and that's incredible. But I'm pretty sure at this point, some people must have had this question, why another framework? The ecosystem is flooded with so many web frameworks, why do we need another one? But before I answer this, I'd like to tell you the comparison framework that I use to judge the framework available in the market. So performance is important for me. Then comes the ease of use, then scalability, built-in features, extensibility, and a term that I coined myself, it's hacker or innovator friendliness, and then the end-to-end application timeline, and most importantly, the community. If we choose a current framework in the market, I believe that we have to settle in some aspect for that. If the performance is there, then the ease of use suffers. If it's scalable, then the built-in features might not be there. Or if the built-in features will be there, it's too opinionated to be extensible. And I believe that we have been talking about scalability a lot, but we do not focus anything on hacker friendliness, which I believe should be improved. And community is pretty nice for most of the frameworks, thanks to you all. And end-to-end application timeline is decent, but I believe can be improved. So my target with Robyn is to create a framework that excels in all of them. It's not there at this point, but we get there. So a summary of Robyn would be a fast async Python web framework with a Rust runtime. But a detailed explanation would be it's a high-performance, community-driven, and an innovator-friendly web framework. Now, speaking of performance, I will let metrics do the talking. And according to Tech Empowered, Robyn can serve over 1 million requests per minute, and we are only getting started. And let's have a look at the architecture to have a sense of why it is so much faster than all the other frameworks. First of all, we have a Rust core. This is the majority of what makes Robyn faster than all its competitors. We have a multi-threaded runtime that's backed by Tokyo. This part allows us to use real Unix threads and bypass the guild at various places. Then we have a worker event cycle that does all the dirty work for us. So this part manages the runtime, passes all the instruction to the Rust code. This part also initializes the thread pool and routes all the incoming requests to the threadZip router. And finally, when we start the app with the Python app.py command, the Python code is converted to Rust objects, as you can see there. And then the router is populated, incoming requests hit the router, and depending on the type of request and the type of function that we have to execute, be it a synchronous function, an asynchronous function, the request is dispatched into the threads, and finally the completed tasks are sent back to the worker event cycle. Pretty cool, right? Now, imagine it being way faster. So Robyn not only allows for multiple workers, but it also allows for multiple processes. We have a shared TCP socket that not only allows you to use the threads of your processor, but also the number of processors that are available in your system. So how would you configure that? You would specify the number of processes that you require and the number of workers that you require, and it's as simple as that. Now, let's talk about the ease of use. I believe that if a framework or a tool is not easy for us to use, we won't bother learning it. As software engineers, I believe we solve some hard problems and some very hard problems. And if a tool is adding to it rather than subtracting from it, I don't think it's any fun to use that tool. So let's have a look at the generic Python app lifecycle. We have a reverse proxy, usually something like Caddy, Nginx. Then we have a web server, a WSGI, an ASCII, or maybe RSGI at some point. And then we have a web framework like Flask, Django, FastAPI, and so on. Let us have a look at the framework side of things. A quick question to the audience. How many of us know how to write a generic Flask application? Wow, so that's like 90% of the room. So it is precisely for that reason Robyn looks like this. I loved writing Flask applications, and I knew many people liked Flask applications as well. So making Robyn after the Flask API was almost a no-brainer. So if you folks know how to write Flask application, writing Robyn would be almost no learning curve. There are a few differences that I believe could improve the developer experience, but should be a very low learning curve. However, let us talk about something that sparked a lot of controversy when I launched Robyn. Something that wasn't a no-brainer, the web server side of things. Traditionally, you would either have a web server gateway interface or an ASGI. These SGIs were created to set a standard. So this allowed the framework developers to expose some interfaces and the server developers to consume from some interfaces. So making the collaboration between the framework developers and the server developers very easy. But so this was pretty nice because the framework developers didn't have to worry about managing the HTTP side of things, and the server developers didn't have to worry about the routing. So this was very nice. However, in Robyn, there is no SGI. You do not need one. A server is built in with Robyn, and that is one of the reasons why Robyn is way faster than its competitors. However, when I tell this to someone, their usual response is, what about PEP 333? Or what about ASGI? My answer is that if you read the PEP carefully, you would realize that it was supposed to make the collaboration between the framework developers and the server developers easier. But in our case, we are handling it for you, so you do not need to worry about that. So when you want to deploy a Robyn app, you just need to configure a reverse proxy, and the server and the framework side of things are handled by us. Now, let's talk about scalability. I like to split scalability into two parts. One is the performance at scale, and the second is how we structure our code when the code base grows. So we have already talked about the performance at scale. We have a reverse proxy, and the server will handle the performance for you, as seen in the benchmarks. Now let's talk about the organization. Robyn supports views for organization of code, and making all the responsible code snippets in a single function. So if you look carefully, Robyn supports functional views at this point, which I believe is not available in any other framework. I like to structure my code in closures at some point, but I couldn't do that in anything else. But class views will be coming soon, because I know some people like classes as well. And sometimes views are just not enough. So Robyn also supports routers. I'm pretty sure most of you must have used routers at this point. So you just create a sub-Robyn app included in some other file, and then you can define your code base like this. Now, let's talk about the built-in features that Robyn houses by default. These are important, in my opinion, because built-in features serve as a solid foundation of a framework, and you should do these things correctly before you move on to other things. Also, if there are no good built-in features, I'd have to implement everything myself, which kills the point of using a framework. So Robyn supports synchronous functions. Robyn supports asynchronous functions, directory serving, static file serving, URL routing and path parameters, middlewares, and application events. So now let's talk about extensibility. This topic is very close to my heart because I am a person who wrote a custom code editor for myself. So extensibility, just having the ability to extend the structure or a framework made me feel very empowered. So for that reason, Robyn supports extensions. So how would you install an extension? You just use the square bracket notation, specify the type of extension that you'd want to use. So for example, we have templates. We support Jinja templates by default. So if you want to install templating, you do pip install Robyn templating, and then you can consume the Jinja template. However, if you decide that you do not like Jinja templates, you want a custom template renderer, you can just consume the interface, override it yourself, and use any other templating engine that you'd like. Now, should you decide that you require an internal GraphQL application and you want a REST application for the client-facing, however, a GraphQL application for internal-facing, we support Strawberry and GraphQL. So you'd create some Strawberry types, and then you'll declare it, and you can use the Robyn GraphQL extension to have an internal GraphQL application. Yep. So coming to the hacker-friendliness side of things, I'd like to talk about this a bit in detail. I am a very strong proponent of frameworks being hacker-friendly. At this point, I believe that in the framework side of things, we are talking about type safety, runtime data validation, but things that were supposed to make large teams collaborate easier. However, we forget that the apps that we talk about were created by 1 or 2 people who just pulled in an all-nighter, caffeinated themselves, wrote maybe terrible code in retrospect, but it is the reasons that these apps exist. So I believe that a framework should also allow quick prototyping or quick development of an application. And Robyn, for that reason, has a unique feature called const request. So what a const request is. So we just talked about the Robyn architecture at this point. And I realized that this part of the code is very global interpreter log dependent. Maybe we could create some optimization where we could pre-compute the response and store it. And this part would be useful when we were serving JSON payloads or serving an image, serving static files, where we do not need to invoke the GIL continuously. So const request basically computes the response in the router and then serves it back to you. So the GIL is not required at this point, and the serving is way faster. Many people would like to call it caching, but you do not see a TTL here, so I'd like to call it const request. So how you would use it is you'd specify a const equals to true flag in the route declaration, and you're good to go. And we have WebSockets. Most of us are aware what WebSockets are. So we have WebSocket methods, so on message, on close, and on connect, and you declare it like you would declare a certain router. And finally, not needing to choose a server, I sometimes got fed up by the paradox of choice that was available with choosing a server. We had Gunicorn, we had Starlet, we have Uvicon. So Robyn comes with a server built in, so you do not need to worry about choosing that. Just a simple command like you would run any Python application, specify the workers, the number of processes, and you're good to go. Okay, Now, let's talk about the end-to-end app creation timeline. I created this term. It basically represents the time required for you to start an application from scratch and get it up and running. So what you would do is you would install Robyn through pip or conda, and then we have something called Robyn CLI. So backend development these days, in my opinion, is not just as simple as writing a Python application right now. We now need to worry about creating a Docker file. We need to worry about configuring the reverse proxy. So Robyn CLI will allow you to have a single flag called create. Will ask you if you require Dockerization, if you require any reverse proxy. And with the simple prompts, you can configure it for you. And also, it will start a basic route for you. So you have a basic Hello World app that you can easily deploy. And if you believe that you're in the zone and you do not want to go outside, you can just have the docs flag, and it will open up the docs for you. At this point, we just open the online docs for you. But at some point in this year, we will have offline docs that will be viewable in the terminal. And you can easily run it in production. You just specify the workers and the processors, and you're basically good to go. Now, coming to the most important part, the community side of things. And before we end this talk, I'd like to tell you another story, the community story. So it started out like how many other amazing things start with the Reddit post. And then we created a Jitter channel. Eventually, we moved to Discord because we believed that it was more accessible. Yes. But come November 2022, and life got a bit overwhelming due to some personal events in my life. And I couldn't devote as much time as I was devoting to Robyn. Then I had a surprising observation. We still made progress during that time. So if we have a look at a commit chart, we see that the community members were driving Robyn at that point. I was still reviewing it and writing some code, but the community was driving it. So we can see the progress that was made during that particular month. So I come to this realization that the community was growing at a steady state. Many features were recommended by the community. 60% of the releases had community involvement, and the 4 out of the past 10 releases didn't require any involvement from me. And I believe that was incredible. So just having Robyn under my org doesn't feel nice, doesn't do the justice for the work that community is doing at this project at this point. So I have decided that Robyn will be housed under an organization, not just an individual entity. The organizations will be called Sparkles. Okay, so if you want to have a look at that, just go to github.com/sparkles. It's spelled like this, and you can read more about it here. So as a future roadmap, we'd like to improve our performance for Robyn, have some automatic document generation, runtime data validation for sure. And there's this feature that I have been talking about with. It's called auto const request optimization, where the developers won't have to worry about specifying the const flag. Have some ORM supports like Prisma, have authentication defaults. This will be there in the next week. Improve WebSockets. I made a PI yesterday, so maybe in the next week too. And transition the repo to the big organization called Sparkles. And most importantly, improve the documentation. I believe that a framework is only as good as the documentation available around it. And we have been actively putting effort to improve the documentation. So create some video-based documentation, more text-based examples, and add some support. So I believe that the 2023 is the year of AI, and have some GPT-4 based response from the framework, or the framework documentation page would be nice. But humans, I believe we are still working for humans, and human documentation cannot be replaced. So at this point, I would ask you to join our community and have a link show up right here. Yay! So, no, too bad. So, start Robyn on GitHub, I guess, if the slides show up. Otherwise, you can, yes, start Robyn on GitHub. And you can ask me any questions that you may have. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for the presentation. I have a couple of questions on Slido. So first question that got one vote. Hi, I was on your talk in Geodata Basel 2022. I tested it. It was not possible to use middleware, etc. Can you tell us important improvements since June 2022?
Oh, there have been substantial improvements for the middlewares. We basically rewrote the middleware architecture from June 22. So try one more time and let me know how you find it.
So try one more time, yeah. Many improvements since then.
Yeah.
Okay, another question. Does Robyn support background tasks like Fast API?
Robyn has application events, but I haven't backgrounded anything at this point. So I'd like to say no. But if that's something that the community wants, we can easily add it in the future.
Okay, and final question. Great work, thank you. Is process management available? If a process crashes, is there info about this? How stable is the GraphQL implementation?
Process management is available, so if a process crashes, you'd get a stack trace. And GraphQL is, I would say, still, like you can develop a GraphQL application, but I wouldn't suggest you to have anything in production with GraphQL and Robyn integration. Because Strawberry had some changes recently, and we need to incorporate that into Robyn. Yep.
Let's see if there is any other. No, that's all.
Perfect.
Thank you very much, Sanskar.
Thank you so much.